Friday. Certainly plenty to talk about today with the news of Flynn. But there's also other things going on here around the state that we're looking forward to bringing you here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Usually we have a GoLocal columnist, Bob Whitcomb, on Thursdays, but we shook things up a little bit and we brought him in on Friday. So we're going to kick off today with plenty of things to talk about.
Hello.
Bob Whitcomb, thanks for coming in. Come a little closer. Okay. So we have to start off.
Not too close though, because given what's in the news these days. So.
Matt Lauer is the second.
Normally I come
topic.
in wearing a wetsuit and everything, completely protected.
So the big news today, Flynn, of course.
Didn't surprise me. Mueller's been working on him for a while, and Flynn, of course, a central figure. And Flynn is very worried about his son, who's crazy. He's the guy who was behind the Pizzagate thing, the non-existent kitty, whatever it was, kitty porn.
Implicating Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, at the bottom of the apparently very nice family pizza joint in Washington. So he does have the excuse of being crazy and being psychotic. And apparently some of this is to try to protect him. But I think this is very dangerous for the president, because it came out later, as you probably read, that Mr. Flynn apparently was directed to call the Russians by Mr. Kushner, the boyish son-in-law of our leader.
He is quite boyish.
Yeah.
So it is.
Well, that's probably plastic surgery or something.
It is the big news today. Obviously, when we knew that charges, several weeks ago, it was speculation.
We did. I know you and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, but it was expected. I think it's very dangerous for the president, and because of the connection with Kushner, and it is collusion. We know the Trump administration had colluded with the Russians. The question is, how directly does it get to the president himself?
Well, that's one of the questions I had today. One charge for Flynn. And there's a lot of folks saying that think he cut a deal, that he's cooperating.
We sort of said he, in effect, did. He said, I'm doing this for the best of the country and for my family. And kind of reading inter alia there, whatever the Latin phrase is, it would seem to suggest he's singing like a canary.
What do you have to say to those folks? I'm sure you've seen it on social media. He was involved with the rally with the chant of "Lock her up" to Hillary. Is the Schadenfreude thick here?
I guess so. I think it's very sad, actually. The whole thing, as you know, by the way, as I have to repeat, I did not vote for Hillary Clinton, and I certainly did not vote for Trump. Who was a terrible, terrible person, and his family is remarkably bad too, except for the little kid, the little 10-year-old. But I voted for Jim Webb. But I think this is a sad, sad tale. I think Trump is an extremely, almost tragic figure for America, because the tragedy is America's tragedy, that someone of that low character would reach this position.
Do you think?
I think that's what's so scary about this thing. He's unstable. He's a total narcissist. He's a crook. And yet a large enough minority of the American population voted him in with the assistance of the Electoral College. So I think that's what's troubling. So I take no pleasure from this. I think the whole thing is very, very sad. Yeah.
We're here on December 1st. What do you think the chances of impeachment are?
I don't think there are any chances of impeachment until after the next election. We'll see what happens in the next election. What happens in the next election? I think it could depend largely, you and I have talked about this, I think you probably agree. What's the economy do? I mean, the stock market's been surging, unemployment is low, wages are not going up, and unemployment is low. But it seems to me like a lot of the financial markets are in a bubble, and people are beginning to say it's a bubble.
Well, market took a little hit today. Did it rebound?
A bit.
Yeah.
A bit. And I think that's just a very momentary thing. I think, the people who would benefit from a tax bill are the kind of people who trade in the stock market. Obviously, it's been very good for them. It's been very good for them since 2009. So anyway, GDP is rising, the markets have been rising. I think it's inflated. I think we're probably going to have a recession next year. Now, you can't time recessions and recovery. It's virtually impossible. But when that happens, then I think, and then the House of Representatives turns over into to the Democrats, then I think he would be impeached. If the Democrats take Congress next year, he will definitely be impeached and convicted. And convicted.
Who is
and
it?
the emoluments clause, getting payments from foreign people.
Well, we'll see moving forward. Again, the big news today, I was talking with
Yeah.
Josh Fenton earlier, said the
Yeah.
FBI
I
usually...
met him, yeah.
He
I
goes-
think he's implicated in this too. Yeah.
He said he usually, FBI usually makes these types of announcements on
Yeah.
Friday, but that Manafort
Yeah.
one was on a Monday. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Why Friday? Well, I think it's Mr. Mueller saying to the other people might be charged, have a nice weekend. You'll have 2 days of high anxiety. Josh is absolutely right in this. They usually pull this stunt on Fridays. It's like bad corporate announcements usually come on
The
Friday.
Friday afternoon news
In this
dump.
case, I think Mr. Mueller wants these people to think about these things, talk to their spouses. I think it's basically meant to raise the anxiety level.
Well, I think there's
Yeah.
some fairly anxious people. I think all the political news shows this weekend
Yeah.
will be fairly
Yeah.
squarely focused on this. One of the things
Yeah.
not in the news
Yeah.
cycle now,
Yeah.
Matt Lauer at NBC.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Look, way back, the first time we lived in Providence, which was in the late 70s, in the Fox Point neighborhood, which was then very unfashionable. He lived across the street from us. He was working for Channel 10, and he had hair. He had sort of dark hair. And he seemed very, very polite, very low-key, not a particularly memorable character. But I guess he is memorable, but not for all the right reasons.
Did you think he would rise to this level of stardom or notoriety?
No. I always thought he was sort of pleasantly banal.
Pleasantly
Yeah,
banal.
no, I mean, it's good morning, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah,
I'll see
very
you on
nice.
PM Magazine.
And he did this sort of magazine-ish feature show, fluff show on Channel 10, and which I sometimes was pretty good. And that was sort of the fashion at the time. I think they picked it up from WHDH in Boston, Chronicle.
Okay, yep.
It was called, and some of this was good stuff. But I think it was a surprise. Yeah, especially the thing like the buzzer or something he had at his desk so he could lock the door behind, sitting at his desk.
Sitting at his desk could lock the door.
Right,
No, I
right.
had seen, someone had said that
Yeah.
most execs had it at NBC studios for safety purposes,
Yeah,
but apparently
yeah.
he used them for other purposes.
For more physiological purposes.
So, as for all intents and purposes, does he have a second act?
No.
No,
He
this
has
is
a
it.
lot of money. He may have a golden parachute it'd be interesting. I'm sure he's got a golden parachute in his contract. The question is, how much of that does he lose for being fired for cause?
Well, that's exactly it. What are
Yeah.
these literally morality clauses? I mean,
Yeah.
the lawyers must be just
Well, I
battling
think
it out right
I
now.
don't think, frankly, I don't think the NBC executives care that much about morality. They care about public relations, and this looks pretty bad.
Well, one of the things they were really in the hot seat for leading up to the Flynn announcement today
Yeah.
was, did they know, stuff going on in studios? People say that there was a culture, that it had been brought to their attention, and only when these very serious allegations from the Olympics,
For the top people.
for the top people
top
to know.
people.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
as I said, who gave Mike Flynn the bigger fruit basket?
Yeah.
Matt Lauer or the NBC execs.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
under a lot of heat for what they knew and when, and why did they wait so long. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see if we see more come from
They
this.
could even have, well, probably not criminal liability, but they certainly have civil suit liability if they countenance this stuff over time. They're sort of inevitably denying it, but it looks pretty bad because these cases keep coming up, and clearly he was apparently acting like this for a long time, as was Charlie Rose. The Matt Lauer thing actually surprised me a bit, not Charlie Rose.
What about
Because I'd
Garrison?
heard stories about Charlie Rose, and I've always thought Garrison Keillor, two things. He was, A, not very funny. I never quite got that. Actually, three things. Two, my Minnesota relatives thought he was a phony. And three, you'd hear rumors about some of this stuff.
Well, if your Minnesota relatives
Yeah,
thought he was a
they
phony, and that
couldn't
was his
stand-
shtick.
Well, he made fun of them, yeah. I mean, they didn't talk that way either. I
Well,
mean, they
again-
were not perfect either, but that's another show.
All of these, celebrities, again, probably don't have these second
Yeah,
acts. I mean, this
yeah,
is it.
yeah,
Like, this was
yeah.
pretty damning.
And how old is Lauer? What is he, 60, 62?
Lauer?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Late 50s,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, I'm sure he'll continue to have a lot of money, and maybe he'll have a little radio talk show in 3 years in Pawtucket or something. I don't know.
Well, we shall see. So talk with us
Yeah.
about the column coming up this weekend. I just wanted to hit you with the hot topic issues. Do you now have a
Yeah.
cheat sheet?
No, I didn't have one, so I'm going to have to, unfortunately, do this from memory. But there was a good piece in the Projo. You guys have actually done some before about the hotels. And I think the hotels they want to build here. One good thing about it it reminded me of a famous quote from Sir Alexander Korda, the famous movie director and mogul. He says, whenever he needed money when he was a poor boy in London, he'd go to the best hotel in town, hang around the lobby, and eventually someone would give him money. And the point of that story is hotels are meeting places, the restaurants, the lobbies, and so on. So I think a lot of the good, if all these things actually are built, the good thing is it does tend to increase energy in a community, in a town, having hotels, because people meet there. I'm not talking about the illegal or immoral assignations.
We're not talking about Backpage.
We aren't talking about that stuff, but the lobby stuff. And if you have nice hotels, very nice hotels where people can meet for meals, meet in the lobby and so on, and they can do business deals. So it's good for entrepreneurs. So you look at the creation of a lot of companies over time, especially New York, which I'm quite familiar with. The number of deals that were originally done in lobbies is impressive.
That is an interesting vantage point because, of course, this building of the hotels, I mean, we've seen Providence has had record occupancy rates. Have had Martha Sheridan
and
here.
it's also a good sign. I mean, I'm skeptical of all these new people coming in. I don't know how long they're going to be here. Infosys, by the way, Infosys, the Indian company, I don't get it because they talk about design stuff. And then they mentioned RISD. I mean, it's kind of computers and stuff. I wonder. I've never quite understood that whole thing. I mean, they're more graphical. I don't know. Somebody I should look into that.
Infosys is interesting, and we had written upon it this week. And one of the things about Infosys, they've been here. They have been working with
that's a good point.
Citizens. So it's sort of okay
it's
if they're
huge.
here.
It's huge. They got 190,000 employees.
So we'll see. We've got the governor. She had a week where I think she had an announcement every day between the airport with Air Canada.
Yeah, which is great.
With Infosys cutting the nursing school over there. It's clearly election season is just around the corner.
Yeah. And so that's good. And I think again, just briefly back to the hotels, I think the hotels, at least to some extent, are something of a vote of confidence. You're talking about announcing a hotel project. It takes you then, a couple of years to build it, put up. So there's some hope there, maybe. Unless there are too many hotels in 10 years, and, they're going to be turned into, Salvation Army dormitories.
Keeping an eye on hotels, tell viewers, Bob,
Yeah.
what else we can expect this weekend.
What else? I'm trying to think of. Oh, yeah, a sad thing. I had to change my column, in fact, because it came in today. The infamous Cape Wind. Well, it looked like they were going to yet again renew the lease. The federal government said they could have the lease. They have to pay them $88,000 a year to have the lease to put up the windmills in the middle of the net. But today, Neil Costello, who works for Cape Wind, said they just gave up. They said
that's it. We're not going to try this fight one more time.
And in this earlier item, I'd sort of praised them for their stubbornness and all that, and
a little editor's note. Scratch that.
Scratch that. They gave up. You can't say after 17 years they're quitters. Really, that's unfair. And they were fighting Bill Koch.
Yes.
Funding all the opposition.
They had been wildly optimistic, but it sounds like they're like not one more year.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So we'll keep an eye on the environmental news, the political news. Are you going to be mentioning any books in your column this weekend?
Not this week, but next, the following one.
Okay.
I'll put in a plug or two.
We'll keep an eye out for it.
Like your book, your novel, and the movie rights, and all that stuff.
That novel that I'm working on?
Yeah. Well, the lawyers are going through it now. So
Friends become enemies? Yes, no.
Okay.
Bob, we'll talk next week.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bob Whitcomb, as he does every week, comes into the studio here at Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We usually see Bob on Thursdays. We switched him up, brought him here on Friday to kick off the weekend, talking about the big news, which will undoubtedly be part and parcel of his upcoming column between Flynn, between Lauer, but also talking about other politics, environmental news, everything that you can read within Bob Whitcomb's columns. It's always great to have him here in studio. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with our next guest here at the Navigant Credit